Ladies and gentlemen, today we have some absolutely massive news regarding what is perhaps the single biggest presidential cover up in the entirety of United States history. You see, yesterday afternoon, it was announced that former President Joe Biden has been diagnosed with prostate cancer with a Gleason score of 9, and that it has already metastasized to the bone. What this means is that Biden has an extremely aggressive form of prostate cancer and that the cancer has already spread from the prostate to the bones throughout his body. And although we can't be certain with Biden's specific case, generally speaking, prostate cancer takes months and sometimes even years to reach the state that it's at with Joe Biden right now. So almost certainly Joe Biden's prostate cancer was present during the 2024 campaign, yet it was hidden from the public. So what this means is that it seems as if the Democratic establishment orchestrated one of the most despicable cover-ups in all of U.S. history in order to keep Joe Biden's terminal illness from the voters in an effort to influence the outcome of the 2024 election. In July of 2024, just 10 months ago, former President Joe Biden's White House physician claimed Biden was perfectly healthy, both physically and mentally. And as we now know, at least part of that report, if not all of that, was just a bold-faced lie. We now know for a fact that former President Joe Biden's mental health had nearly entirely collapsed by then, proving that his physician lied. This raises serious questions about whether he also lied about Biden's struggle with prostate cancer. In truth, the Democratic establishment's deception shielding a terminally ill presidential candidate is an absolutely outrageous betrayal of every single American that voted in 2024. They prioritized power over the trust of our democracy. But now, ladies and gentlemen, this next piece of information we're going to talk about is absolutely going to blow your socks off. But before we take a look at that, I do want to say real quick that if you guys enjoy the daily news updates, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. But okay, check this out. On the day that Joe Biden dropped out of the 2024 election, Joe Biden's brother, Frank Biden, had a very curious interview with CBS. Take a look.
I want to go to Nancy Cordes at the White House because I'm told she has some reporting for us. Nancy?
Margaret, we're now hearing for the first time from a member of President Biden's family about this decision. CBS News had a brief conversation with Frank Biden, one of President Biden's two younger brothers, and here's what he told us. He said, "I'm incredibly proud of my brother. Selfishly, I will have him back to enjoy whatever time we have left. He is a genuine hero. Country over self. It sounds corny in our cynical political environment, but he nor I are cynical. The goal remains the same: defeat Trump and continue the work that Joe has done. My hope is that our party rallies around this heroic act." We asked him whether he feels that his brother's overall health and vitality played a major role in this decision, and he says, "In my humble opinion, absolutely." So a member of the president's family now confirming that the president's health was indeed a major factor in this decision and calling his brother a hero for making the decision to pass the torch to Kamala Harris.
So folks, did you catch all of that? Just weeks after the White House claimed that former President Joe Biden was in perfect, impeccable health, Frank Biden, Joe Biden's own brother, told CBS that Joe dropped out of the election for health reasons, hinting at terminal illness. Joe Biden's own brother confirmed that he dropped out of the election because of, quote, health reasons, and that he was looking forward to spending, quote, whatever time we have left together. Folks, I'm sorry, but there is only one way to interpret that message. In truth, Frank Biden's statement makes it painfully obvious that former President Joe Biden's prostate cancer was known during the campaign, concealed to keep voters that supported him in the dark about his failing health. But this is where this entire situation gets even more insane. You see, immediately after Frank Biden's statement to CBS went public, in order to discredit what he said about Biden's deteriorating health, CBS actually ran a story in which they alleged that Frank Biden didn't know what he was talking about because he's a raging alcoholic and not to be trusted. So CBS ran a deliberate hit piece against Joe Biden's own brother in order to publicly destroy his credibility so that people wouldn't believe his claim that Biden's physical health had deteriorated. Honestly, folks, this entire situation is absolutely sickening when you stop and think about it. The facts are very clear. The media, aligned with Vice President Kamala Harris and the Democratic establishment, suppressed evidence that former President Joe Biden was terminally ill, advancing their radically progressive agenda instead of the truth. And so the reality is, this cover up is an absolutely repulsive and perverse manipulation of public trust and our entire democratic system. The Democratic establishment's actions are a total betrayal that undermines the very foundation of our presidential elections. And so, hey, here's the truth. The Democratic establishment's deliberate and intentional concealment of former President Joe Biden's cancer diagnosis absolutely constitutes election interference, a federal crime that demands immediate accountability for every single person that was involved in this deliberate attempt to deceive the American public. Legally speaking, the plan to hide former President Joe Biden's terminal illness, propping up a slowly dying candidate to install Vice President Kamala Harris after his death, is a serious attempt to rig the outcome of the 2024 election. Very clearly, the Democratic establishment's plan was to effectively circumvent the results of the 2024 election by putting a walking dead man in the White House, then waiting for him to slowly die so then they could install Kamala Harris as our new unelected president. Like I said, folks, every single thing about this situation is absolutely evil and morally reprehensible. And so here's my opinion. This entire situation needs to be taken very seriously by President Trump's Department of Justice, and investigations need to be made into who exactly knew about Biden's cancer diagnosis and who exactly helped to cover it up. Because, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to talk about a constitutional crisis, as the Democrats absolutely love to talk about, let's talk about how the Democrats just attempted to insert a slowly dying man with a terminal illness into the Oval Office so that after he passed away, God bless his soul, they could install yet another unelected puppet, Kamala Harris. We've had presidents resign for situations less controversial than this. Remember Nixon's Watergate fiasco? That was nothing compared to the stunt that the Democrats just tried to pull by covering up Joe Biden's deteriorating health. Ladies and gentlemen, these people need to be held accountable. That is what it's going to take to put America first. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we wrap up, I do want to say real quick that we officially have a Morse News Twitter page as well as a Morse News Facebook page. So if you use either of those platforms, please go down below and drop a follow in order to get breaking news updates that relate to everything we talk about here in the YouTube videos. But everyone, that is going to be a wrap for today's video, so please go down below and drop a comment. Let me know what you think about all of this. Please like the video while you're down there, and like I said earlier, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. Thank you all very much for tuning in today, and of course, as always, stay safe.